In this world, finding a mage is honestly harder than finding true love in a modern urban city. And yet, there's this kid named Turan, who managed to reach the realm of Grand Mage at a super young age. Ironically though, he chose to lay low and live as some no-name shepherd up on a desolate hill, spending day after day with nothing but a bunch of sheep for company. Honestly, talking to them is enough to turn his brain to stone. That endless, repetitive grind eventually made our main character completely numb and detached from everything around him. Well, at least until today, when a high-level demonic beast suddenly showed up right at the bottom of his hill. The bad news instantly spread to the nearby village, moving as fast as a system notification. Down in the village, there was this innocent little boy happily yelling about how he was a mighty mage. The kid even shouted, "Hey demonic beast, take my magic attack," while the little girl playing opposite him didn't back down, declaring, "I'm the demonic beast, and I'm gonna swallow you whole." Saying that, the boy raised his wooden stick high into the air, acting like he was casting some ultimate skill. And the result, the stick smacked right into the little girl's forehead, making her wince in absolute pain. She furiously yelled, "Why did you actually hit me?" But the boy just coolly replied, "Well, you're a demonic beast, so you're supposed to get beaten by a mage." She immediately demanded to switch roles so she could be the mage, but he selfishly refused. Just then, Elder Rabbit walked up from behind them with a warm, gentle smile. He looked at them and teased, "Wow, you kids sure are lively this early in the morning." The two of them quickly bowed and politely greeted Mr. Rappers. The little boy innocently asked him how to become a mage, but the old man just shook his head and said it wasn't something you could get just by wanting it. He explained that mages were the absolute peak of human society, much like nobles and knights, who possessed mystical powers passed down from their ancestors. Because of that, the kids could never become mages. Hearing this, the boy's father stepped up from behind, sighing as he asked what the old man was telling the children. Ramos looked totally bewildered and asked if the rumors about the demonic beast were actually true. The guy next to him frowned and asked what in the world he was talking about. The little boy quickly explained that he heard a demonic beast had shown up near the village. Ramos's expression darkened as he confirmed that the rumor was indeed true. That made the other guy flinch a bit, nervously asking if there was going to be a problem. He explained that Rob saw it by the village gates last night. The thing was completely covered in dark shadows, looking like a massive leopard the size of a whole house. But he told everyone not to worry, because the village chief had already gone to the city to hire a mage to take care of it. Once they managed to bring the mage here, that demonic beast would be destroyed in no time. Hearing that, the villagers finally let out a sigh of relief. The adults also warned the kids to stay out of the forest for now, just in case things got dangerous. Rabbus picked up a stray branch and warned them that unless you were a mage, you had absolutely zero chance of killing a demonic beast. The boy's father looked worried and asked if the whole village knew about this yet. He replied, "Of course, everyone's already heard the news." The father then asked, "Well, what about the guy up on the hill?" Roberts looked completely clueless and asked, "Who are you talking about?" The other man clarified, bringing up the lonely shepherd who lived all the way up on the western Hissarin hill. Meanwhile, up on that very hill, the sheep were just chilling and resting lazily in the afternoon breeze. They were talking about that shepherd guy, Turan. It was a name that pretty much no one ever paid attention to. At that exact moment, Turan was just sprawled out on the ground, staring blankly up at the sky. With nothing around him but sheep and grass, the scenery was definitely beautiful, but he was honestly sick and tired of it. Every single day was exactly the same, repeating over and over like a carbon copy. He frowned in frustration, feeling like his life was just completely pointless and dull. Our main character let out a heavy sigh, thinking that if he kept living like this, he'd probably forget how to even talk to other humans. But right at that moment, he suddenly heard someone yell, "You useless little brat." Rabbus marched over with his walking stick, scolding him for lazily slacking off from work before the sun had even gone down. Turan got annoyed and shot back, "You're blocking my sunlight, get out of the way." That little comment made the old man's face turn completely red with anger. The old man asked if he was still holding a grudge over what happened in the past. Turan just kept his cool and asked, "What are you even talking about?" Then Turan brought up how, right after his mother died, the old man tried to seize their flock of sheep as communal property. That instantly made Rabbus speechless. Turan bluntly stated that if that was what he meant, then yeah, he absolutely held a grudge. He wasn't exactly generous enough to just hand over his mother's inheritance. They definitely weren't close enough to be making small talk about their health. Turan coldly told him, "If you've got something to say, spit it out and get lost." Turan's eyes grew incredibly dark and sharp as he questioned the old man. Rabbus lowered his voice and informed him that a demonic beast had appeared, but Turan just gave him a flat look and casually asked, "A demonic beast?" The old man nervously patted a sheep's head and explained that it was a massive leopard, spotted by Rob, and the whole village had already been warned. He casually mentioned that it sounded like a pretty big deal. The old man anxiously asked if he wasn't scared, since he was an easy target out here. He replied that the village chief had already gone to hire a mage anyway. so they just needed to stay careful. Rabis claimed he only came by because he was worried about him, but Tyran cut him off, complaining that adults were never honest. He bluntly called him out, saying he only cared about the sheep, not him at all. This made the old man flush with anger out of pure embarrassment. The main character smirked and scoffed. "If you're done talking, then get lost, old man." He even threw in an extra jab. "Standing here, I can practically smell the mold on you." Rabis choked on his rage, forced to just turn around and storm off under Tyran's ice-cold stare. Demonic beasts was simply the term humans used for creatures that possessed magical power. Just as humanity had mages, animals that awakened mystical powers evolved into demonic beasts. Tyran wondered if a real mage would actually bother coming to this rundown rural village, feeling quite curious to see one for himself. He figured the mage hired by the village chief was probably just some mid-tier guy, definitely not top-tier talent. Even so, he still wanted to see what kind of power they had, secretly evaluating the situation in his mind. Suddenly he caught a strange scent drifting in on the wind. His eyes instantly narrowed. He realized it was the heavy, metallic stench of blood. As twilight fell over the area, Tyran immediately sprinted toward the source of the bloody scent. He slowly eased up his pace as he ventured deeper into the woods. He muttered to himself. The smell was definitely coming from this direction. All of a sudden, he noticed something totally off right by his feet. Tyran froze in his tracks, his gaze turning ice-cold as he stared straight ahead. Right there, he laid eyes on a gruesome scene, though his face remained completely emotionless. The lifeless body of Rabis was lying on the dirt. Tyran just calmly called out the old man's name. He sarcastically scoffed. "You told me to be careful, yet you went and kicked the bucket first." Deep down, he was mildly surprised that the stench of blood was actually coming from the old man. He examined the wounds and quickly deduced that this wasn't the work of some ordinary wild animal. The culprit was undoubtedly a high-level demonic beast. Right at that moment, Tyran snapped his head up, fully on guard. Standing right in front of him was a massive, towering monster. It slowly crept toward him, step by step, but he didn't flinch even for a second. He just stood there casually, almost like he was waiting for something to happen. The panther demonic beast finally revealed itself, its piercing eyes locked dead onto Tyran under the fading evening light. Meanwhile, down in the village, a little boy curiously asked if demonic beasts were super strong, and if even the grown-ups couldn't beat them. His father replied that if he ever tried fighting one, there wouldn't even be bones left of him. This made the poor kid go totally pale. Trembling, the boy asked what they were supposed to do. The man quickly reassured him, saying the village chief had already gone to hire a mage. He promised that the great mage would wipe out the demonic beast and save the whole village, so there was no need to be scared. The little boy, still shaking, asked, "The mage won't lose, right? He's gonna teach that monster a lesson." The father gave him a firm, confident nod. He confidently declared that mages were great figures born with pure magic. Just one spell was all it took to obliterate a demonic beast in a flash. Meanwhile, back in the woods, Tyran casually glanced over. With the hulking monster standing right next to him, Tyran's lips barely moved, as if he was whispering something into the air. Die! The moment the word left his mouth, the massive beast's body was violently sent flying backwards. The giant panther was hurled way back, but it wasn't completely down for the count just yet. It let out a vicious, guttural growl, with thick, murderous intent rolling off its massive body. Tyran began radiating an incredibly heavy aura of pressure, yet his face remained as calm and unbothered as ever. He muttered under his breath, wondering to himself, was that seriously not enough? Just as he lost focus for a split second, the panther demonic beast lunged right at him like a bolt of lightning. "Stop!" Tyran roared, barking out a harsh command. Strangely enough, the ferocious panther froze on the spot, then actually backed away. A small, knowing smirk crept onto Tyran's face. He thought to himself, "I knew I couldn't take it down in one hit, but is it really this hard just to make the damn thing stand still?" The crazed leopard smashed the boulder next to it, grinding its teeth in pure fury. It glared viciously at Tyran, but he wasn't about to just stand there and take a beating. Our main character lowered his stance, crouching slightly as he braced himself for a counterattack. He took a deep breath, telling himself that it was finally time to get serious. Tyran scooped up a loose rock from the ground. Then he pulled out his herding sling, muttering to himself that a shepherd should fight like a shepherd. Right at that moment, the leopard lunged straight at him again. Tyran used his power to harden the rock like solid steel, then wrapped his sling tightly around it. With intense focus in his eyes, he swung his arm back and launched the rock. The rock reflected sharply in his eyes as he whipped the sling around with all his might. Tyran roared, "Accelerate," as his foot stomped firmly into the dirt. A razor-sharp aura of killing intent flared up around his body. "Pierce," he shouted, as a concentrated beam of energy shot forward. The raw power blasted straight ahead, not deviating a single inch from its path. It locked right onto the leopard, landing a devastating, dead-center hit. Blood splattered everywhere as a massive wound ripped open across the demonic beast's body. But Tyran's energy didn't stop there. It continued to ripple wildly through the air. The sheer force pierced through absolutely everything, leaving the beast completely defenseless. The monster crashed heavily to the ground, screaming in absolute agony with its jaws wide open. Turan slowly walked over, telling himself that the job wasn't quite done yet. Hovering high above was another massive rock, waiting patiently for his command. The moment he whispered, "Drop," the boulder plummeted straight down onto the leopard's skull. The heavy impact triggered a massive, deafening shockwave. Turan calmly stared into the thick cloud of dust, completely unfazed by the destruction. The demonic beast was completely wiped out. Not bad for my first time using this move on a monster, he thought to himself. Should I just chuck this carcass into the valley and call it a day? He muttered under his breath. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. Great, another free favor for the villagers. Staring blankly at the monster's lifeless body, Turan reminded himself of a crucial secret. He was actually a mage. He had discovered this extraordinary talent 8 years ago. Back when he was just 10 years old, Turan could already make objects float in midair. He excitedly called out to his mom, begging her to look at the wooden logs floating around the room. But she didn't say a word. "Mom," Turan called out again, confused. He bragged about how he could summon fire and control the wind. The memory of that exact day was forever burned into his mind. Suddenly, his mother screamed at him to stop right there. It was the one and only time she had ever been that furiously angry with him. Stunned, Turan just stared at her. She reached out, gently grabbed the floating log, and softly called his name. Sitting down next to him, she patted the spot beside her. "Come here, sweetie. Let's talk for a minute." She looked into his eyes and asked, "Do you want to stay with me for a long, long time?" Turan nodded sadly, tears welling up. "Then you must swear to me," she whispered intensely, "that you will never, ever use this power again." She made it crystal clear. He could never show his abilities to anyone, not ever. Turan looked up, asking her why. Slowly and carefully, his mother explained the harsh truth about the nobles and the knights. He told her that he remembered. He knew that anyone with those powers was called a mage, regardless of whether they were a noble or a knight. The nobles were the pure descendants of the Frehin people. The knights, however, had bloodlines mixed with regular mortals. Hearing this, she nodded gently, praising him for being such a smart boy and remembering it all so well. She went on to explain the bitter divide between the two classes of mages, and the dark reason why Turan could never use his gifts. It was because he inherited his powers from his father, a mere knight, and to the arrogant nobles, people like them were nothing more than filthy slaves. His mother looked straight into his eyes, strictly warning him to never let anyone know he was a mage. She softly asked if he could promise her that. 8 years had passed, and our main character still kept that childhood vow. That promise hadn't been broken, not even once. He had absolutely no intention of revealing his true identity as a mage. He also had no desire to leave this peaceful hill and step into the brutal and competitive urban world. Turan slowly opened his eyes, snapping out of his deep memories. Outside, the sudden sound of heavy pounding on the door echoed, accompanied by angry voices screaming his name. Our guy casually walked over and opened the door with a completely unfazed expression. Standing right in front of him was a mob of furious people, glaring daggers at him. After letting them vent, Turan just let out a tired yawn and asked, "What exactly are you guys trying to say?" He looked at them coldly and said, "So you're assuming that I killed Rabbus?" The mob instantly grabbed him by the collar and roared, "Damn right we are, you shameless bastard." They angrily accused him of murdering Rabbus in cold blood and tossing his body out as monster bait. Hearing their wild claims, Turan just stayed completely silent, not even bothering to argue back right away. After a moment, he finally spoke up. "I get why you want to pin this all on me." The crowd froze in shock. Turan bluntly exposed them. "It's because you're all too cowardly to face the magical beast yourselves, so you desperately need a scapegoat." He gave them a sarcastic smirk and added, "That's definitely the easiest way for you cowards to dodge responsibility, isn't it?" Hearing that, one of the men snapped in rage and threw a heavy punch right at Turan. But our guy simply leaned to the side, effortlessly dodging the blow. Deep down, he couldn't help but think about how incredibly convenient magic really was. As long as your desire is strong enough, it will become reality, and the only price you have to pay is mana. Turan barely moved his lips, whispering softly, "Just fall." Instantly, the angry guy slipped and fell flat on his face, and Turan didn't even have to shoot a single spark to do it. Just a subtle little trick like that was more than enough to completely humiliate his opponent. He made sure the whole thing looked completely natural, leaving absolutely no trace of magic behind. He just needed to hold back enough, making sure none of these idiots actually died. He decided to use an invisible, crushing pressure to suppress the entire mob. While thinking this over, Turan flawlessly executed a series of punches and kicks, moving like an absolute pro. Dozens of wooden clubs were sent flying into the air, clattering loudly as they hit the dirt. For 8 long years, he had flawlessly hidden his true identity as a mage. Once everyone was dealt with, Turan calmly dusted off his hands, looking like he had just finished taking out the trash. He let out a long sigh and said, "You guys really should have saved this energy to plan a proper funeral for Rabbus instead." He then turned to the group of women and asked, "Are you ladies here to pick a fight too?" A girl frantically shook her head in denial. They stuttered that they only wanted to see him. Tyran stayed quiet for a second, then muttered, "Just drag these idiots back down the mountain." After that, he casually walked back inside his house and pulled off his shirt. Tyran figured that the merchants down in the town would probably use this mess as an excuse to lowball him the next time he went to sell his goods. He smirked to himself. If that was the case, he'd just have to teach them another painful lesson until they coughed up a fair price. Shaking off the thought, he let out a sigh of relief. That brutal beatdown he just handed out was definitely enough to keep them away for a while. Suddenly, there was another sharp knock on the door. He groaned in annoyance, muttering, "Seriously, are these losers really not giving up?" From outside, the frantic pounding on the door just kept going, getting louder and louder. Tyran stormed back out and yelled, "Do you idiots really want another beatdown that badly?" But the moment he saw the towering man standing in front of him, he stopped dead in his tracks. Tyran lowered his voice and asked, "Who are you?" The man looked incredibly guilty and quickly apologized for showing up at such a bad time. Our guy looked the man up and down, carefully sizing up this bizarre, unexpected guest. Then he explained that a few troublemakers had just left the area. Tyran recalled his mother's lessons on etiquette. He wondered if his manners were polite enough, since he rarely had a proper conversation with anyone in this remote town. Besides, a group of armed men showing up in this boring place was definitely going to draw some attention. Tyran spoke up, asking if the man was looking for a place to rest. He let out a soft sigh and then invited the older man inside. Before long, a modest spread of food was laid out on the table. Tyran honestly admitted that he wasn't wealthy, so he didn't have any fancy delicacies to offer. Kian took a bite and praised him, saying the meal was already quite a feast. Kian chuckled, telling the boy, "You actually surprise me." Tyran replied that he had never hosted strangers from faraway lands before. He explained that he was born and raised on this very hill, making a living as a shepherd. He added that travelers rarely ever passed through their small town. Right as he was taking a drink, Kian's gaze suddenly froze. Tyran also raised his cup, downing his drink in a single gulp. Kian let out a laugh, muttering, "How fascinating." The main character looked confused and turned to ask what exactly was so fascinating. Kian pointed out that a mere shepherd with the refined manners of a noble must have been raised with incredibly strict discipline. Tyran explained that he learned it all from his mother. Sadly, she passed away from a severe illness a few years ago. Kian offered his sympathies, praising her for raising such an impressive son. He said he was certain she was resting peacefully by the sides of the gods. Tyran modestly replied that he was simply living by his mother's teachings, nothing more. Then the main character asked what brought a man like him to such a rural area. Kian smiled faintly, explaining that he had taken on a commission to handle a certain issue. Tyran looked surprised and asked what the job was. Kian answered that he was hunting down the person who managed to kill the Black Panther demonic beast. Kian openly revealed that he was a mage, causing Tyran's expression to immediately stiffen. He cautiously asked, "Wait, so you're the mage the village chief was talking about?" Kian gave a slow nod, confirming it. Kian politely asked if he could ask a question of his own. Tyran quickly obliged, telling him to go ahead. Kian stated that he could clearly sense the aura of a demonic beast lingering around the area, yet he couldn't find a single trace of any vicious creatures. He was also incredibly curious as to why the boy knew about the beast, yet remained so completely calm and unfazed. Kian pointed out, if the demonic beast is hunting people, you could very well be its next target, so why aren't you terrified? He noted that it was honestly hard to believe a simple shepherd, who had never even left his hometown, could be this fearless. His tone deepened as he asked, "Who exactly are you, kid?" The answer hung heavy in the air, "A mage." A memory flashed through Tyran's mind. He had once asked his mother why he had to hide the fact that he was a mage. His mother had looked at him with deep worry, warning him about the cruel nobles out there in the world. He had innocently asked, "Cruel nobles?" She explained that if the nobles were the masters, then the knights were nothing more than the hunting dogs kept on their leashes. She warned him they might show you favor today, but tomorrow they would gladly sell you off or use you as a sacrifice without a second thought. She told him she never wanted him to live a life like that. With tears in her eyes, she asked if he wanted to stay by her side. Tyran had eagerly nodded. She then gave him a strict warning. Absolutely no one could ever find out that he was a mage. She stressed that he had to be especially careful around other mages. If they found out, they would tear the two of them apart and turn him into nothing but a tool for their own gain. To protect himself and to keep his identity as a mage a complete secret, she whispered, "There might come a day when you have to kill someone with your own two hands." Tyran's eyes turned ice cold as he remembered those words. Now, harsh reality had dragged him right into this very situation. Kian softly broke the tension, asking, "Why have you gone so quiet?" The older man quickly realized that the main character was dead serious. Kian let out an awkward chuckle and said, "Man, that intense look of yours just totally ruined my joke." Turan let out a quiet breath of relief. "Wait, so that was just a joke?" he asked. He quickly apologized, admitting that he really wasn't used to that kind of banter. Kian stepped closer, waving it off and saying it was his own fault. Turan forced a smile, explaining that it was his first time ever hearing a joke about mages, so it caught him off guard. Kian just laughed along with him. Kian held out his hand, pointing out that they hadn't even properly introduced themselves yet. He introduced himself. "I'm Kian," he said, "just a lone traveler wandering through." Turan shook the man's hand with a polite smile. "I'm Turan. I really should have introduced myself first." He smiled, introducing himself as Turan, just an ordinary shepherd. As they continued chatting over their meal, Turan mentioned he had just turned 18, while Kian revealed he was already 75. Turan was surprised since the old man looked much younger than his age, but Kian explained that mages age slowly and enjoy long lifespans. Curious, Turan asked what had led him to choose the life of a wandering traveler. Kian shared that after 60 years of serving the Arabian clan, he just wanted to be free and unbound by duty. His carefree tales brought a sense of warmth to Turan, who was genuinely enjoying their lively conversation. Kian spent the whole evening laughing as well, filling the house with a light and peaceful atmosphere. Our main character never expected this random encounter to be so enjoyable. They talked until the first light of dawn peeked over the mountains, and Kian finally realized it was almost morning. Turan laughed, saying they had been so caught up in their chat that they didn't even notice the sunrise, while Kian stood up to prepare for the rest of his journey. Kian placed an Arabian silver coin on the table, noting that it was pure silver and more than enough to cover the meal. Turan accepted it with a smile and wished him a safe and successful hunt. Kian chuckled and told him not to sound like they would never meet again, joking that he might just come back to bother him for another delicious meal. The sky gradually brightened over the hills behind the town. The sheep were leisurely grazing on the grass, soaking in the peaceful morning air. Turan called out loudly, "All right, gather around." Hearing his voice, the flock of sheep immediately lifted their heads and looked his way. One by one, they obediently trotted over to our main character. Turan let out a soft, relieved smile. Today was his first time interacting with another mage, and it had been a really long time since he had such a comfortable conversation. He rubbed a sheep's head, thinking about Kian's easygoing vibe and natural sense of humor. It was a rare, warm feeling to get from a grown adult. Later that very afternoon, Kian showed up at his door again with a hunted wolf slung over his shoulder, saying, "I'm back," which only made Turan respect him even more. He realized his old mindset had completely shifted. He used to think that knights were nothing more than soulless tools working for the nobles. As he headed back into town, Turan was busy stressing over how exactly he was going to report all this to the village chief. Meanwhile, on a forest trail, Kian was taking a stroll to confirm that the Hissarin region was finally clear of magical beasts. He quietly observed his surroundings to make absolutely sure. The snapped and shattered trees were clear proof of a recent battle, but the monster's aura was completely gone. Kian paused in front of a tree trunk riddled with embedded rocks, wondering if the magical beast had actually been taken out. He wondered who could possibly be strong enough to kill it, or if the village chief had secretly hired another mage. Either way, Kian breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the villagers were safe, that was all that mattered. Suddenly, a dark premonition hit him, and his eyes snapped wide open in high alert. Kian instantly whipped around to check his blind spot. A massive leopard's paw stepped out from the shadows, bringing with it a thick, nauseating stench of death. Its head was twisted and grotesquely deformed. It was absolutely horrifying to look at. Even worse, the oppressive aura radiating off of it was far more dangerous than before. Kian froze in pure shock. He realized this was the undead wraith of the magical beast. He stumbled back in horror. Who in their right mind would leave behind this much lingering magic? The undead leopard instantly lunged, swinging its massive paw right at Kian. The sheer force of its claws made the ground quake, but he barely managed to jump back and dodge the strike. Kian quickly analyzed the situation. If a magical beast's corpse isn't properly purified, it transforms into a vengeful wraith, and there was no way a seasoned mage would make such a rookie mistake. The rabid wraith continued its frantic, bloodthirsty pursuit. Kian was completely baffled. The person who killed it was definitely a mage, so why the hell did they just walk away and leave this mess behind? He wondered if they were just clueless about the consequences. I mean, even a total rookie knows about this basic rule. Kian gathered glowing golden mana in his hands, heavily suspecting that there was some kind of dark conspiracy at play here. But whatever the reason, he had to destroy this thing right here, right now. With a swift motion, Kian blasted a blinding beam of light straight at the wraith. But that attack barely did any damage. He was absolutely stunned. His magic being completely ineffective meant its power was way beyond anything he could handle. Kian stared at the empty space in front of him. The creature had completely vanished, leaving nothing behind but a puddle of black sludge. He figured it was using some kind of stealth magic, so he kept his guard up and stayed on high alert. Suddenly, a stream of boiling black sludge erupted from the shadows right behind him. The shadowy panther materialized right at Kian's back, letting out a deafening roar. It took a vicious swipe at him before he even had a chance to dodge. Kian's arm was torn open and bleeding heavily. This definitely wasn't an enemy an ordinary knight could ever hope to fight off. The impact sent him flying backward, and he hit the ground, panting heavily for breath. Kian never expected to run into such a high-level undead creature in a remote village like this. Despair started to creep in. He couldn't help but think that maybe this was where he was going to die. Kian lowered his head, but then he gritted his teeth. There was no way he was going to give up that easily. Even if he had to die here, he was taking this damn monster down with him. He channeled every last drop of his magic into the palm of his hand, waiting for the exact moment it lunged at him. At the exact same time, the panther sprang into the air. Kian unleashed his final strike, putting absolutely everything he had into it. He pushed off the ground and charged straight forward. The undead raised its massive claws, fully prepared to deal the killing blow. But right at that moment, a massive surge of magic blasted in from out of nowhere. It completely blasted the panther away from Kian. Rubble and debris scattered everywhere, leaving the old man completely stunned. That terrifying undead creature was totally wiped out in a single strike. The guy who cast the spell casually stepped up and asked if he was all right. Kian let out a breathless chuckle, saying that a joke from a simple shepherd really caught him off guard. He turned around, only to see Tyran casually strolling toward him. Kian was absolutely shocked to realize that this kid was a mage all along. Tyran just gave a simple nod to confirm it. Kian asked why he had hidden his powers earlier, but Tyran just stayed completely silent. So he changed his question, asking why Tyran bothered to save him when he could have easily just walked away. Tyran softly replied, well, because. Later that night, inside the house, the wolf was lying completely motionless on the floor. Tyran tilted his head and asked Kian why he pushed himself so hard. Kian looked at him, completely confused. Tyran continued, saying he didn't know what the village chief promised him, but with his skills, he could make money a whole lot easier than this. Kian just smiled. Kian told him that the villagers were pitiful people. Tyran frowned and asked what exactly made them so pitiful. Kian explained that they lived out here on the dangerous frontier, constantly living in fear without any protection. Tyran just shot back that it wasn't his responsibility. Kian firmly believed that a mage's true calling was to wield divine power, which meant it was their absolute duty to protect ordinary people. He let out a heavy sigh, admitting that every mage ultimately had their own ideals and their own path to walk in light. Hearing that, Tyran just gave a soft, knowing smile. He pointed out that everyone has the right to choose exactly how they want to live their own life. Suddenly, the undead creature regenerated and lunged straight at them to attack. Kian yelled out a warning, shouting that this wasn't something they could fight head-on. He insisted that only the high-ranking nobles had the power to stop it, so he frantically ordered Tyran to go warn the villagers to evacuate immediately. The undead transformed into a mass of pitch-black darkness, staring at them with a pair of chilling, glowing blue eyes. Kian boldly stepped right in front of the monster to block its path. He thought to himself in a panic, wondering just how much longer he could possibly hold out against this thing. But Tyran just stood there totally unfazed, casually saying that this wasn't going to be a problem at all. Tyran manipulated a pebble by the road, casually mentioning that if his last strike had landed, everything would be fine. This left Kian completely dumbstruck. Seeing that absolute calmness, Kian realized the kid probably hadn't even gone all out yet. The seasoned traveler knew right then and there that their meeting was no accident. Countless tiny stones levitated in the air, caught in the grip of Tyran's mana. They shattered all at once, causing the magical aura around our main character to surge violently. Kian chuckled softly, saying this might just be the origin story of a mage powerful enough to shake the entire world. Tyran replied that he, too, wanted to see where his true limits lay. Hearing that, Kian instantly lost his temper. The old man firmly declared he wouldn't allow such recklessness, because that entity was incredibly terrifying, no matter how much of a genius the kid was. He ordered that the moment the beast swiped its claws, the two of them had to coordinate perfectly. But before the monster could even make a move, Tyran launched a preemptive strike, sending it flying across the battlefield. It was then that Kian realized the massive gap in their power. If he jumped in, he'd only drag the kid down. He couldn't even keep up with the speed of that last attack. He quietly pulled back the magic gathering in his hands, fully aware that he was absolutely useless in this fight. Kian stepped back to the sidelines, watching the overwhelming surge of mana explode, and just let Tyran steal the show. On the surface, Tyran still looked totally unfazed, but it was pretty obvious that he was actually struggling. He threw himself backward to dodge an attack, while the demonic panther barely had a scratch on it. Kian screamed at the top of his lungs, warning him that normal physical attacks couldn't kill an undead beast. While hastily dodging another strike, Tyran yelled back, asking what the hell he was supposed to do to take it down. Kian instantly told him to use fire. Tyran raised his hand, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. The old man quickly added that lightning magic might do the trick too. A burst of crimson flame shot forward, aggressively scorching the monster's tough hide. Tyran furrowed his brows, realizing it still wasn't enough. Meanwhile, Kian yelled out, "No, not like that." Kian thought to himself that casting a spell required establishing a basic law of cause and effect. He couldn't help but wonder, had this kid really never learned the absolute basics of magic? Suddenly, a crazy realization hit Kian. As he watched Tyran dodging for his life, he thought, wait, did this kid actually kill the panther earlier, and then just leave its corpse to turn into an undead? If that was true, it meant Tyran had literally never absorbed a single drop of mana from his kills. Left with no choice, Kian shouted out instructions. He told him not to just spark a flame, but to shape it and blast it forward. Deep down, the old man was absolutely mind-blown by the kid's raw power. Tyran stopped running, planted his feet, and hyper-focused on channeling his mana. A fiercely bright, crimson flame violently erupted from the palm of his hand. Watching closely, Kian noted that sparking a flame was easy, but actually controlling it required serious, systematic training. But then, Tyran raised the flame and effortlessly condensed it into a massive fireball, leaving Kian completely speechless. The kid charged forward, violently hurling the giant fireball straight at the undead beast. The raging inferno instantly swallowed the monster's entire body whole. Engulfed in vicious flames, the panther thrashed and rolled on the ground in agonizing pain. Kian shouted out, "Keep your focus, keep pumping your mana into it." Thanks to the old man's guidance, Tyran gradually gained control, burning away every last trace of the undead energy. The bright glow of the flames reflected intensely in his deeply focused eyes. It didn't take long before the beast finally stopped thrashing around. Kian let out a massive sigh of relief, muttering, "We got it, we actually won." He was still in absolute shock. That undead was so insanely powerful that normally, only a low-ranking noble could even stand a chance against it. Kian's pupils shrank in disbelief, realizing that this random kid had just single-handedly taken it down. Tyran casually turned around and asked if it was finally over, which only made Kian even more shell-shocked. Kian walked over and told him, "If you don't want another undead popping up, you need to absorb its mana right now." Tyran just blinked and asked how to do that. The old man guided him, telling him to visualize pulling that raw power directly into his body. Tyran gave a firm nod. He closed his eyes, and immediately, a dense stream of mana began flowing out from the beast's charred corpse. The energy gathered in the palms of his hands before seamlessly seeping into his body. When Tyran opened his eyes, they practically glowed with a brand new, terrifying surge of power. Every single vein in his body felt the rush of boiling mana coursing through him. The sheer intensity of the experience left our main character completely shell-shocked. Kian chuckled, telling him he would feel a unique rush of euphoria, admitting it was still hard to believe even after seeing it with his own two eyes. He asked if this was his very first time absorbing mana, and Tyran confirmed that it was. Kian thought to himself that after the initial awakening, a person's mana would gradually increase, and the fastest way to grow was by hunting magic beasts or killing other mages to absorb their power. He was absolutely stunned. For Tyran to absorb mana for the first time and still control his magic so flawlessly, it proved his talent was on a whole other level. Kian finally realized that this young man was anything but ordinary. He called out Tyran's name, and the young man turned around, asking what was on his mind. Kian gave a deep, formal bow, apologizing for his earlier disrespect before asking which noble family he belonged to. Tyran hesitated for a moment, clearly taken aback, while Kian maintained his utmost respect. Tyran just pointed at the older man's blood-soaked arm, suggesting he really ought to get that cleaned up first. Once they got back to the house, Kian finally got his wounds properly bandaged. He apologized all over again, feeling terrible that someone of such noble standing had to step in and fight. Tyran got annoyed, snapping that he was just a simple shepherd who didn't even know his own father, so he needed to drop the whole noble act. He frowned, demanding that the old man stop treating him so formally, and Kian finally backed down and softened his tone. Kian asked why a mage with such incredible power would choose the life of a shepherd, since it just didn't make any sense. Tyran recalled his mother's strict warning to live quietly like this right up until the day she passed away, leaving Kian deep in thought. Turan explained how his mother had warned him that the world below the mountain was full of deceitful nobles who would just use him and throw him away if they found out who he was. Kian nodded in solemn agreement. Turan was honestly surprised by that kind of reaction. He admitted he thought Kian would say his mother was just being overprotective, but the knight simply replied that she wasn't wrong at all. Kian lowered his head, explaining that because mages wield such immense power, they always attract conflict. In fact, 20 years ago, there was a massive war between the noble families. He recalled the brutal war between the Arabian and Zaha families, a bloodbath that claimed countless lives. Out of the 3,000 Arabian knights who fought in that war, more than 900 of them fell in battle. Turan listened quietly as Kian revealed that his closest friends were among those casualties. He reminisced about Denver, his old mentor, and all their shared dreams that were left painfully unfulfilled. Even his wife and son were brutally murdered by the Zaha family, leaving him as the sole survivor of his household. Kian let out a sigh, saying that Turan's mother was right in a way. After all, the life of a knight was often far more fragile than that of a commoner. However, he added that she had completely underestimated Turan's natural talent, which naturally piqued the young man's curiosity. Kian openly admitted that despite being an elite knight himself, Turan had effortlessly wiped out the undead wraith that he couldn't even scratch. He firmly stated that the boy's raw potential had, at the very least, already reached the level of a high-ranking noble. Kian truly believed that in terms of pure innate ability, Turan belonged right at the top of the upper echelon. Turan looked puzzled, mentioning that his mother said his father was just a regular knight. Kian gently explained that sometimes, raw talent completely transcends bloodlines. He strongly suggested that it would be best for Turan to leave this secluded hill and go explore the vast world outside. When Turan asked why, Kian told him with utmost seriousness that humanity desperately needed truly talented nobles and knights right now. He explained that ever since the dawn of time, the races abandoned by the gods have been lurking in the shadows, just waiting for their chance to rise again. Kian's voice filled with anger as he pointed out that, meanwhile, the foolish nobles were too busy tearing each other apart in petty power struggles. He looked the young man in the eye, declaring that this era needed a noble who was both incredibly strong and genuinely kind-hearted, just like Turan. Right before he left, Kian paused and asked him one last question. Was he really satisfied with just being a shepherd for the rest of his life? The heavy question left Turan in total silence, and as he stood there, his solitary figure looked incredibly lonely against the landscape. Turan quietly asked what he could even achieve down below the mountain. Kian simply replied that it all depended on what he truly desired. Kian gave him a warm, friendly smile. He pointed out that things like wealth, fame, a family legacy, or even just genuine friendships were pretty hard to come by in such a desolate place. Wasn't that right? Turning his head back, he painted a picture for the boy. Just imagine becoming a righteous hero like him, hunting down demonic beasts and protecting innocent villagers. As a parting thought, Kian suggested he could become an adventurer, exploring completely uncharted lands, or even join a powerful family and dive headfirst into the fierce battle for ultimate authority. Turan chased after him right to the door. After hearing all of that, he finally admitted that the old man actually made a lot of sense. Standing face to face with Kian, he gave a small smirk, admitting that a life like that would definitely be a hell of a lot more exciting than herding sheep on a hill all year round. Turan smiled faintly. For the first time in his life, he was truly curious about the outside world. Seeing this, Kian worried he was building up the kid's expectations too much. Still, he promised to support whatever choice Turan made. The older man suddenly remembered and asked about his bloodline ability. Turan just stared blankly, asking what a bloodline even was. Kian quickly apologized, realizing he had forgotten the boy didn't know much about magic yet. He explained that a bloodline is a special trait passed down from your ancestors. For the Freyan people, it's the very thing that separates the nobles from the knights. Kian conjured a small flame to show him. Then, he asked if Turan had any spells that felt incredibly natural to use, or any innate talents that didn't require casting magic at all. Turan wondered out loud if his immense physical strength counted. Kian shook his head, explaining that having enough mana naturally enhances the body anyway. Turan thought back to his razor-sharp sense of smell and his dead-accurate stone throwing. Kian noted that an exceptional sense of smell could definitely be a bloodline trait. He stroked his chin thoughtfully. Having perfect aim with ranged weapons is the hallmark of the Arabian family, he said. But to be fair, that's also quite common. Kian leaned in, excitedly urging him to tell him more. Turan nodded and kept sharing the details of his abilities. After talking it over for a while, Kian sighed and said he finally understood. Seeing the shift in his mood, Turan nervously asked him what was wrong. The older man's sudden, dead-serious expression only made the boy even more curious. Kian spoke quietly. I've realized that your abilities bear a striking resemblance to one specific family. Which family is that? Turan asked immediately. Kian lowered his head, solemnly bringing up the name of a highly renowned noble house. He vividly remembered the sheer brutality of that bloodline. They were once feared and known as the Master Pursuers. It's the Zaha family, he revealed, the very same family that violently clashed head-on with the Arabians in the past. Tiran froze in sheer disbelief the moment he heard the name Zaha. A bead of cold sweat rolled down his cheek. The Zaha family, he muttered under his breath. Tiran cautiously glanced over at Kian. Was it really possible that he carried the bloodline of this man's sworn enemy? His mind was a total mess. He didn't know whether he should apologize or just keep his mouth shut, since these were the sins of strangers. Kian suddenly called out Tiran's name, breaking the silence. Yes, senior, the boy replied. Kian gently patted his shoulder. Don't look so worried, kid, he said comfortingly. He reminded the boy that he had zero part in that ancient war. Still, the heavy guilt gnawed at Tiran. Kian gave him a warm smile. If we always demand an eye for an eye, he advised, this cycle of hatred will never truly end. Don't you regret this? Tiran asked quietly. Kian just chuckled. Regret what exactly? A cold breeze swept by, carrying the heavy weight of his question about finally leaving the mountain. Kian's voice grew deep and serious. If you go down this mountain and chase after power, you'll probably end up joining the Zaha family. Your talent is just too immense to ignore. But honestly, I believe in your character, he added. Those words completely caught Tiran off guard. Kian looked him right in the eye. You saved my life, and you had the guts to show me who you really are. If you ever lead the Zaha family, I know you could stop history from repeating itself. Hearing those words, Tiran fell into a deep silence, completely lost in his own thoughts. Kian casually walked past him. Don't overthink it right now, he advised gently. You haven't even made a decision yet. Tiran's eyes hardened with newfound resolve. My mind is completely made up, he said firmly. A small smile crept onto his face. I want to take my chances. I'm going down the mountain. Kian nodded in deep satisfaction, but Tiran quickly held up a hand. Just, not right now. I'll leave only after your wounds are fully healed, he promised, leaving Kian feeling deeply touched. A little while later, they were sitting comfortably inside the warm wooden cabin. Kian put on his serious teaching face. If you want to use magic, you absolutely need mana. That's exactly why people call it the Master Key. Tiran tilted his head. What do you mean by Master Key? He asked. Kian clarified. Well, mana itself isn't omnipotent, but it's the absolute baseline requirement to cast any kind of magic. So how do you even know if you have enough mana? Tiran asked. Kian smiled and told him to sit tight while he explained. Kian held up 3 fingers. Magic basically comes down to 3 things: your bloodline, your elemental compatibility, and the laws of cause and effect. He went on to explain that a bloodline is literally bound to your genetic heritage, and this rule almost exclusively applies to the nobility. He used an example to make it clear. Like right now, it would be nearly impossible for you to heal my wounds using magic. Tiran slowly nodded in understanding. However, Kian continued, someone from the Ravista bloodline in the south has the natural ability to heal wounds without any training at all. Tiran looked at his hand, asking about compatibility, and Kian explained that it was simply his level of affinity with magic. Tiran understood. It was like conjuring a fireball was as natural as throwing a rock. Kian smiled in satisfaction, saying that if he only created basic fire, he wouldn't achieve that kind of speed and destructive power. He emphasized that the final and most crucial factor was the law of causality. Kian asked, what would happen if you tried to use mana to kill me directly? Tiran guessed that it would just flash, and then fail completely. Kian demonstrated on a cup, showing that without a proper cause and effect, the spell would simply fall apart. He explained that if there wasn't a logical cause for the desired outcome, the laws of nature would actively block it. Tiran nodded slowly, saying that he somewhat understood the concept. The young man elaborated that to kill someone, you had to create a physical cause, like shooting a fireball, instead of just magically wishing for their direct death. Kian's eyes lit up brightly, praising him and saying he could easily become a magic scholar. Tiran wondered out loud why taming normal beasts was so easy, while demonic beasts were so difficult. Kian explained that it all came down to the massive difference in their mana reserves. The two of them continued their deep discussion for a very long time, safe inside the wooden cabin. Tiran broke a sweat, marveling that magic was far from simple. Kian added that a truly great mage had to understand both the core principles and the broader context. Tiran then asked about the unique traits of the Zaha bloodline. Kian replied that they were absolute masters of stealth and tracking. Kian suggested they test it out right then and there, and Tiran immediately stood up. Tiran closed his eyes tight, focusing entirely on the thought that he didn't want to be seen or heard by anyone. Slowly, his physical body began to dissolve, fading away into a wisp of white smoke. Tiran couldn't see Kian's facial expression, so he nervously asked if it was actually working. Right before Kian's eyes, there was nothing left but a faint ripple, blending perfectly into the thin air. A few seconds passed before Kian finally spoke. I really can't see you anymore. The old man gulped hard, completely stunned by the incredible sight. The space right in front of him was completely and utterly empty. A moment later, Tyran slowly began to materialize and reappear. Kian sighed, saying it had been a very long time since he last saw this ability. He mentioned that it used to strike pure terror into the hearts of the Arabian Nights. Tyran commented that this power felt so strong it was almost unfair, but Kian quickly reminded him that it wasn't invincible. Changing the subject, Kian offered to teach him some advanced cultivation methods, which left Tyran feeling a bit puzzled. Kian simply replied, "You saved my life out there, kid, and I trust you." The old man placed a hand over his heart, firmly stating his absolute faith in Tyran's character. Sometime later, the village chief caught wind of the news and yelled furiously, "Are you seriously planning to sell the sheep and just leave?" Boiling with anger, he demanded to know who had herd the flock, and how Tyran dared to make that decision without consulting the village first. Hearing that, Tyran frowned and closed his eyes. He shot back, "Go find yourselves another shepherd. This is my property. What I do with it is none of your damn business." His harsh, unyielding tone made the greedy villagers step back in hesitation. Tyran followed up with a cold warning. "If you refuse to buy them at a fair price, I'll just set the whole flock free and walk away. Go ahead and try to catch them all yourselves, see how easy that is." Hearing this, one of the panicked villagers frantically called out to the village chief. The village chief gritted his teeth. He knew this kid wasn't bluffing, and pushing him any further would only end badly for them. Finally, with extreme reluctance, he tossed a heavy pouch of coins to Tyran, completely backing down and accepting the compromise. "Stay or go, do whatever you want," the chief muttered bitterly. With that settled, our main character and Kian finally left that miserable village behind. On the road, Tyran suddenly remembered that the villagers still owed Kian his compensation money. He asked if they should turn back and demand it. Kian just let out a warm laugh. "I never planned on taking their money anyway. Besides, you were the one who took down that demonic beast, not me." Hearing that, Tyran just shrugged it off and let the whole matter go. When they finally reached a fork in the road, Tyran came to a halt. "Well, I guess this is where we part ways," he said softly. Kian looked at him with a hint of regret, apologizing that he couldn't travel alongside him. He explained that he was just too used to being a solitary wanderer. Tyran offered a warm, genuine smile. "It's totally fine," he replied. "Thank you so much for everything." Kian gently closed his eyes and formally said his final goodbyes. Tyran beamed a bright, confident smile, wishing him safe travels and hoping they would definitely cross paths again someday. He stood there for a very long time, quietly watching Kian's solitary figure fade into the distance. It wasn't until later that he finally understood why he hated it when the old man acted so formal with him. Even though he never lacked his mother's love, deep down, he still desperately yearned for a father figure. A strong, capable man he could actually look up to. Time marched on, leaving a long trail of the traveler's footprints etched into the sand. All around him was a desolate wasteland, with the wind howling harshly through massive rock formations. In the distance, a lone cloaked figure was steadily making his way forward. That figure was none other than Tyran. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he spotted something up ahead. Just a short distance away, a merchant caravan was slowly making its way across the desert. Tyran breathed a sigh of relief, glad that he could finally ask someone for directions. He stepped right up and intercepted them, hoping to find out where the nearest city was. The caravan leader growled, demanding to know who he was. Tyran calmly replied that he was just a traveler looking for directions. They pointed him in the direction of Murray City, and he gave a calm nod, saying he understood. Tyran offered a quick thanks and started to walk right past them. But one of the guys suddenly blocked his path, telling him to hold up a second. The guy flashed a wicked smirk. "You think you can just get your info and walk away?" he sneered, catching Tyran completely off guard. He quickly regained his composure. "So what if I am?" he asked coldly. The thug immediately demanded that he pay a toll. The entire group drew their blades and surrounded him, barking at him to drop his coin pouch on the ground. Tyran glanced around, realizing he had just stumbled into a gang of bandits. The thug just arrogantly laughed and admitted it. The leader lazily rested his sword on his shoulder. He smirked, saying that out in this desolate wasteland, he could die and no one would ever know. He suddenly leveled his sword right at Tyran's throat. "Drop your gear right now before we change our minds," he threatened. But Tyran didn't even flinch. He just calmly replied, "So it turns out you're just a bunch of cold-blooded murderers." In that moment, Kian's strict teachings flashed through his mind, especially the fundamental rule of cause and effect. Along with everything else his master had passed down to him. A confident smirk tugged at the corner of Tyran's mouth. He looked at the bandits like they were nothing more than living punching bags. His voice was ice cold. "I guess I'll just use you guys for target practice," he declared. But he suddenly paused as the bandits burst into loud, mocking laughter. The leader scoffed. "Look at this idiot, he actually thinks he's a mage," he taunted, while all his underlings laughed along. Without a word, Tyran's pale finger gave a slight, effortless flick. With a swift wave of his hand, he summoned a fierce gale that violently hurled the entire gang into the air. His hood blew back, revealing a dangerously sharp gaze. He made a mental note that controlling the wind this way actually used way less mana. Turan was honestly surprised. Just a tiny fraction of his mana had created such a massive gust of wind. Meanwhile, the bandits were absolutely panicking. Slowly and deliberately, he uncapped his water flask. In an instant, the water inside levitated and formed into wickedly sharp spikes. Every single one of them pointed directly at the terrified bandits. One of the thugs went wide-eyed, completely paralyzed by fear. The lethal water spikes shot forward and pierced right through him, violently throwing him backward onto the ground. Turan casually spread his arms out. He figured this magic would be way more useful near a big body of water, even if just throwing rocks would honestly be faster. The bandit leader fell to his knees in a panic. He desperately begged for his life, crying out that he had no idea Turan was a mage. But even as he groveled, he was secretly signaling his remaining men to sneak up and surround him. Without missing a beat, Turan casually lifted his foot just a few inches off the ground. He stomped down hard. A massive shockwave rippled out, violently blasting the sneaking bandits right off their feet. The leader's face instantly went pale, staring in pure, utter disbelief. Turan just stood there, his eyes completely cold, as he looked down at the lifeless bodies scattered across the sand. He asked why they dared to attack him when he was completely caught off guard, and the guy answered with a tremble in his voice. Turan demanded to know, "What exactly would you guys do if I were a real mage?" The leader stammered out an excuse, saying that because he was so polite, they just assumed he was weak. He confessed that since Turan actually bowed his head to say hello, they figured he was just some ordinary pushover. Turan replied with a cold, detached tone, thanking him for the incredibly useful lesson. The bandit leader desperately begged for his life, hoping he would be spared. But right then, a razor-sharp drop of water materialized right above his head. Kian had once warned him that he'd meet all kinds of people in the future, and he had to remember one crucial rule. Turan remembered his master's exact words: never, ever show mercy to scum who would gladly kill someone just for a few coins. Kian's voice had been dead serious back then, and the main character had confidently replied that he understood completely. Turan stared down at the leader's lifeless body. He realized that sparing one scumbag like this could end up getting 10 innocent people killed. He muttered to himself that he had stuck around there for way too long. Turan started walking, following the fading wheel tracks left in the sand. He traced the path of the wagon, those ruts now permanently burned into his memory. Turan bit his lip and kept pushing forward without looking back, the heavy realization setting in. He had actually taken a human life. The image of the leader's terrified eyes flashed through his mind, but Kian's stern warning quickly drowned it out. He reminded himself that those guys had ambushed him, and they absolutely would have kept hurting others if he had let them live. His footsteps slowed to a halt where the wheel tracks began to fade, and slowly, his racing heart began to calm down. Turan took a deep breath, looked up at the endless blue sky, and bravely marched forward into this brand new world. His eyes swept over his surroundings, and he couldn't help but marvel at the sight. Turan tilted his head up at the magnificent cityscape looming right in front of him. So this was the legendary small city of Murray that he had heard so much about. Out on the street, a mother was holding her little girl's hand, weaving their way through the bustling crowds. With his backpack strapped tightly to his shoulders, he stepped right into the city. His eyes were wide with curiosity, having never seen such a packed and lively place in his entire life. The towering, solid stone buildings and the completely alien architecture, so utterly different from his old village, completely blew his mind. Turan quietly strolled through the town, taking everything in. It was at that very moment he finally felt like he had arrived in a proper, living city. He stopped right in front of a colorful fruit stand to ask a question, and the vendor greeted him with a big, welcoming smile. The merchant asked what he'd like to buy, but Turan politely explained that he wasn't actually there to purchase anything. He kept recalling Kian's advice: whenever you reach a new city, always look for an inn first. No matter where you go, there will always be a place for a weary traveler to rest. But reality hit hard. The vendor instantly got annoyed, waving him off and snapping that if he wasn't going to buy anything, he needed to get lost. Turan just stood there, totally baffled as to why the man was being so incredibly rude. He wondered if in the city, you literally had to buy something before you were even allowed to ask a question. He pointed to a bright red fruit and asked for the price. The vendor gave a blunt, short reply: 2 dupit coins. As Turan started counting out his cash, the vendor openly mocked him, calling him a clueless outsider who didn't even know the true value of goods. He handed over the money, and then finally asked where the nearest inn was. The grumpy vendor simply pointed him in the direction of a building with a green roof. A weathered wooden sign dangled out front, marking what was known as the most famous inn in the entire city. A gorgeous young woman named Lena greeted him with a bright, welcoming smile. Lena openly flirted, calling him handsome, while Turan just smiled politely and asked for the price of a one-night stay. She told him it would be 16 ducat coins, and he quickly agreed to take the room. Turan handed over his coin pouch and mentioned that he had something he wanted to ask her. Lena responded with a gentle, encouraging tone. He was totally blunt and just straight up asked if there were any monsters with active bounties around here. That question made Lena completely freeze in her tracks. Turan was dead serious about this. He knew he had to hunt down monsters to absorb their mana and make a living, exactly like Kian had taught him. Seeing her fall completely silent, he naively asked why she wasn't answering him. That finally broke the tension, and she burst out laughing. Lena smirked and told him that in this world, absolutely nothing comes for free. Over in the corner of the inn, there were a few mysterious, tightly sealed wooden crates. Turan sat down, grabbed his glass of water, and pointedly asked her what was inside those boxes. Lena looked genuinely surprised, asking if he seriously didn't know about the city hall. She couldn't help but tease him, playfully calling him a total country bumpkin. Turan listened quietly as she explained that the city hall was where officials worked under the local lord. Lena told him it was already closed for the day, and if he wanted to claim his monster hunting rewards, he would have to go back tomorrow. She asked if he was a monster hunter, but Turan just stared back and asked what a hunter even was. Lena shared a local rumor that anyone who kills a monster becomes a mage, but honestly, she thought only an idiot would actually believe that. Suddenly, a heavy hand dropped onto his shoulder. A voice chimed in, arguing that it was not just some silly superstition. A blonde guy stepped up, claiming he had seen it with his own 2 eyes. He watched a monster killer awaken as a mage. Lena called him Mayman, the resident monster hunter. He confidently declared that he would not stop hunting until he became a mage himself. Turan gave a polite nod in greeting. Mayman quickly pulled his hand back and laughed, offering a quick apology. Turan pressed for more details about this whole killing monsters to become a mage thing, and Mayman was happy to explain. Lena rested her chin on her hand, listening as they discussed how mages grow stronger by hunting monsters, and how even an ordinary person could awaken their powers this way. Mayman pointed to the 4 guys standing behind him. He said they were all out hunting together just to become mages. Turan asked if any of them had actually made it as a mage yet. They replied that the only mages in the entire city were the Lord's personal mage and his 3 subordinates. Mayman let out a laugh, asking if Turan had ever hunted a monster before while sizing up his gear. Turan pulled out his trusty slingshot. Mayman immediately noticed the heavy wear and tear on the weapon. Turan deadpanned that his slingshot was perfect for hitting egg-sized targets. Mayman chuckled, saying it might be good enough to hunt some rabbits or foxes. Mayman then offered him a spot in their party, mentioning that they were in desperate need of a long-range marksman. Turan parted his lips slightly, clearly lost in thought. He brushed off the offer with a vague rejection. Later that night, lying in bed, he figured he had absolutely no reason to tag along with them. His face was etched with exhaustion after such a wildly chaotic day. With his backpack resting next to the bed, he still could not quite believe that he had actually left his village. Turan raised a hand, casually playing with his mana, and wondered what the future held for him. Suddenly, his wrist twitched. He had just picked up on a very strange noise. Turan instantly bolted upright. He locked his eyes on the door and demanded to know who was out there. He recalled Kian's strict warning, even when staying at an inn, never ever let your guard down. Kian had told him that the city did not guarantee anyone's safety. At the time, Turan had simply nodded and said he understood. Kian had drilled it into his head to stay alert, and Turan had committed those words to memory. He crept toward the door, his hands already surging with ready magic power. He cracked the door open just a tiny bit, so he could peek outside. Turan kept his eyes perfectly calm and focused. Lena was standing right outside his door. She flashed a sweet smile and asked if he was already asleep. She purred that her room was a bit too cold and offered to keep him warm for the night. Turan was completely caught off guard. Lena struck a seductive pose, playfully twirling the little ribbon on the front of her dress. She kept laying on the charm, dropping heavy hints that left him totally confused. Lena finally had to spell it out literally, but Turan was still completely clueless. She stepped in close, whispering that for just a little coin, she would do absolutely anything. Turan just blinked and asked, "And what if I do not want anything?" Lena gave a teasing laugh. She told him that one look at his face said he definitely wanted it. But to her absolute shock, Turan simply squeezed his eyes shut like a meditating monk. Lena's eyes went wide. She was utterly speechless. In Turan's mind, the incredibly strict face of Kian was flashing like a warning sign. Kian had explicitly warned him to watch out for tavern girls and working women, because a lot of them carried some nasty diseases. The old man had preached that even with a strong immunity to diseases, he should never let a moment of lust lead to a lifetime of regret. Flushed with pure embarrassment and anger, Lena stormed off. Turan let out a deep sigh, realizing that surviving in the city was not going to be easy. He laid back down, thinking about how you had to pay money for even the tiniest scrap of information. The city really was a cold, unforgiving place. Just then, he caught the faint sound of someone whispering nearby. It was one of the underlings asking Maymin why he had invited Turan. After all, the kid looked completely useless. Maymin gave a faint smirk, remarking that the kid's arrogant mouth was practically begging to be monster bait. But looking at him brought back memories of his own youth, and he couldn't help but worry about Turan going hunting with such garbage weapons. Maymin let out a warm chuckle, thinking that with him tagging along, the kid just might survive a little longer. Hearing that, Turan just offered a quiet, knowing smile. Stretching his arm toward the ceiling, he realized this city wasn't quite as cold and heartless as he originally thought. The next morning, bright sunlight washed over the grand city hall. The guy working the reception desk lazily looked up and asked what he wanted. Turan bluntly asked if he actually worked there, to which the man scoffed, "Who the hell do you think I am?" He stated flat out that he was here to hunt monsters, catching the receptionist completely off guard. Kian's old warning echoed in his mind, reminding him that the world would never be kind to him, and he remembered asking why that was. Back then, Kian had been sitting on a jagged rock, casually petting a sheep as he said, "The world has zero reason to play nice with you, but if you want respect, that's the easiest thing in the world." Turan had raised an eyebrow, waiting for the punchline, and Kian just smirked. "Just show them you're a mage. Regular folks will drop to their knees without you lifting a finger." Snapping him back to reality, the receptionist shoved a wanted poster across the desk. The second Turan grabbed it, the guy barked, "Hey, don't take that outside. Read it and hand it right back." The paper showed a terribly drawn black crow. When Turan genuinely asked if this was supposed to be a monster, the guy snapped, "What does it look like? A stray cat?" He flipped through some more files and added, "If you manage to kill it, you have to drag the carcass back into the city. If a mage doesn't drain its mana, that thing will turn into an undead." He even threw out a harsh warning, saying that leaving a monster corpse to rot was punishable by death under city law. Turan just sighed, "Yeah, I know." That ugly sketch triggered a dark memory of a past mistake, and he quietly swore to himself that he would never let another beast mutate into an undead on his watch. Turan asked if the city knights handled the hunting, but the guy didn't even bother looking up as he scoffed, "They've got better things to do." He shoved the paper back toward him. "The knights are busy keeping the peace inside the walls." Turan frowned, "So I'm supposed to go out there and hunt it myself." Getting his answer, Turan turned on his heel to leave, while the guy muttered that dirty work was meant for wandering mercenaries like him anyway. By the time the receptionist looked up, the kid was already gone. He just shook his head and mumbled, "Great, another dead body left out in the wild." Pure, milky white eyes gleamed from within a coat of pitch-black feathers. The massive black crow twitched in its final moments, a fatal strike having pierced straight through its chest. Back at the city hall, the receptionist went completely pale, staring in utter disbelief. He gaped at the dead beast that had just been dumped on the floor. You took it down this fast." Turan just stood there calmly dusting off his hands. "Yeah, and I handled it solo." He immediately demanded his bounty money, sending a chubby clerk scrambling to the back to fetch it. They handed over a small, jingling pouch, nervously telling him he did a good job. Turan just gave a brief nod of thanks. As soon as he walked out the door, 3 staffers started whispering furiously. Taking down a monster while keeping its corpse that perfectly intact was practically unheard of. The receptionist suddenly shot a nervous glance back toward the front door. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Turan still standing there. You haven't left yet," he stammered. Turan casually asked if there were any other monsters actually worth hunting, making the poor guy break into a cold sweat. Bathed in the warm sunlight, the young hunter stood there looking completely relaxed, as if he was just warming up for a killing spree. Later that day, a massive, mouth-watering feast was laid out on the table, featuring the absolute most expensive dishes the tavern had to offer. Lena was staring at him in pure shock, completely blown away that he had hunted 30 monsters in just 3 days. Turan, on the other hand, thought it was no big deal. He just kept casually stuffing his face, acting like massacring 30 beasts was just a light workout. Wiping his mouth, he casually mentioned that he wasn't doing it just for the bounty money. The real reason he was grinding through all those low-level monsters was to drain and absorb their mana. Thanks to that little trick, his overall strength was skyrocketing at an insane pace. Staring at his open palm, Turan could feel the dense energy coursing through his veins. His mana reserves were already several times larger than when he first met Kian. But lately, he could feel himself hitting a wall, bottlenecking. These low-level trash mobs just didn't pack enough juice to help him achieve a true breakthrough. Suddenly, he called out Lena's name, making her jump in her seat. "Why yes," she squeaked. Pointing at the empty plates, he jokingly asked if someone had sneaked in and stolen his food. Lena just rolled her eyes. "Are you kidding? You literally inhaled all of it yourself." She teasingly pointed out that for such a skinny guy, he sure ate like a starving bear. Meanwhile, the tavern chef was beaming with pride, absolutely thrilled to finally have a customer who practically licked the plates clean. Turan stood up, complimented the food, and promised to come back next time. Suddenly, a hand snatched his hat right off his head. An arrogant punk stepped up from behind him, Turan stayed perfectly still while the guy sneered. Looks like you made quite a haul, huh? Before the punk could even finish his sentence, he ate a brutal punch straight to the face. He staggered backward, and his buddies immediately started cursing. Turan tilted his head and asked coldly, "What you guys want to cut?" The guy flew into a rage and swung a wild punch. Turan just stood there and effortlessly locked his arm. His elbow cleanly blocked the incoming strike. Another thug grabbed a chair and lunged right at him. Turan knocked the chair away with his bare hands. Before the guy could even react, Turan unleashed a devastating counterattack. A single strike sent him crashing backward. From the sidelines, Lena gritted her teeth and yelled, "Stop." She screamed, "Don't you dare fight in my tavern." Mayman suddenly showed up, bowing his head in apology. Turan stood quietly, listening as Mayman explained that he had already punished those two idiots. Mayman explained that they were completely broke, so they got jealous. He signaled the two thugs to bow their heads and apologize to Turan. Turan asked, "Are you guys really struggling that badly?" And Mayman shamefully admitted it. He confessed that they only had 3 days left before their room money ran out, but quickly added, "That's our problem though." Turan held out his coin pouch right in front of him. He told him to take it, saying, "Consider this a thank you for inviting me on that hunt the other day." Mayman was surprised and asked how he knew, but Turan bluntly told him it wasn't a free handout. Turan demanded information in exchange, and Mayman confidently accepted the deal. The city slowly returned to its usual peaceful vibe. Turan stood on a high vantage point, thinking that this would probably be his last hunt in Murray. He went over the information about the next city in his head and prepared to hit the road. Back at the inn, they had talked for a long time, and Turan realized that Mayman was actually a genuinely good guy. Even though he wasn't as mature as Kian, Mayman was incredibly sincere and kind-hearted. Suddenly, Turan's gaze froze. His sharp sense of smell caught a strange, metallic scent of blood in the air. Trusting his uneasy gut feeling, Turan immediately dashed into the forest. His hand lightly brushed against a rough tree trunk. He came to a dead stop in a quiet, isolated clearing. Right in front of him, a lifeless body was slumped beneath a tree. Turan instantly recognized the face. It was one of Mayman's teammates. The corners of his mouth trembled slightly. The dead man's eyes had already clouded over with a dull, lifeless gray. A few loose coins were scattered right next to his limp hand. Turan knelt down and whispered, "What the hell happened here, Mayman?" He repeated the question into the dead, heavy silence. Turan glanced over and spotted another body, slumped at the base of a nearby tree. The guy was still barely clinging to life, desperately trying to whisper something out. In the darkness, the absurdly long front teeth of a monstrous rabbit glinted menacingly. Turan turned his head, only to see the rabbit monster chewing away happily on a human corpse. Its pristine white fur was stained with fresh blood, dripping heavily from its mouth. Turan narrowed his eyes to study the creature, then slowly stood up. The beast's bloodshot eyes flashed, and it suddenly lunged forward, sinking its teeth deep into a tree trunk. Turan gritted his teeth, shocked by its blinding speed. Its ears stood straight up, sharp as blades, and he had barely dodged the attack. Turan pulled out his slingshot, spinning it lightly in his hand. His eyes widened as he focused every ounce of his concentration. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he fired a stone projectile straight at the rabbit. Several stones ripped through the air at terrifying speed, all converging on a single point. But the rabbit monster nimbly dodged every single one. Turan frowned, realizing the beast was perfectly adapted to evade long-range attacks. The 3 razor-sharp claws on its feet dug into the dirt to build momentum. It exploded forward, charging straight at him with terrifying speed. Its glowing red eyes were locked tightly onto its only target. In a split second, Turan's figure seemed to vanish from where he stood. The rabbit monster slammed into the dirt, completely missing its pounce. Turan had already circled around to its blind spot, his dagger ready in his hand. With a precise thrust deep beneath its neck, the monster let out an agonizing screech. He immediately leaped backward to create some distance. His body pressed up against a tree trunk, then faded away like a mere illusion. The enraged rabbit spun around and viciously attacked the tree. It aggressively tore and clawed at the wood in a non-stop frenzy. Jumping and slashing wildly, it had gone completely berserk. Suddenly, a thick cloud of white smoke billowed up in the middle of the forest. The rabbit monster stood among the splintered trees, howling in pain. Blood dripped steadily from its body, soaking into the earth below. Its sharp ears drooped heavily, and its tongue hung out in total exhaustion. Turan's black boots stepped out from the shadows onto the dirt. Turan walked over just as the massive rabbit finally collapsed, completely dead. Out of sheer habit, he extended his hand toward the lifeless body. His expression was deadpan as he absorbed every last drop of its mana. His pupils flared with a bright blue light, realizing the amount of mana this time completely dwarfed what he got from the leopard earlier. As his eyes gradually returned to normal, he couldn't hide his pure astonishment. Leaning weakly against a tree, an injured survivor gasped out, "Are you a mage?" Turan calmly admitted that he was, leaving the dying man to stare at him, asking why he would willingly reveal his true identity. Turan asked if any of the four wanted their belongings sent back to their families, but tears just streamed from the man's gray eyes as he confessed that they had no one left in this world. Even Mayman was lying in a pool of blood nearby, staring up with cold, lifeless eyes. Turan's mind drifted back to a memory, recalling how Mayman once spoke of the great city of Aurum and the massive library located there. When he first heard about the library, he was completely blown away by the thought of thousands of books in one place. Mayman had laughed, teasing him that the moment books were mentioned, he got all fired up, and Turan had just smiled back, asking if he was really that obvious. But Mayman then warned him that the library wasn't open to just anyone, prompting a curious Turan to immediately ask how to get inside. Mayman revealed that only a true mage was allowed to step foot inside, and Turan had fallen silent, finally understanding what he needed to do. Standing amidst the bloody forest, he replayed that conversation in his head, telling himself that his mind was already fully made up. Turan stood before the 3 makeshift graves he had dug himself, promising he would make his way to the great city of Aurum. His face was filled with sorrow as he softly whispered Maymin's name. He walked away, wishing his friend would finally find happiness in another place. The scene shifted to Turan standing in a massive line, waiting to enter the city. He felt a bit embarrassed for having been so overwhelmed back in Murray, considering Aurum was infinitely more majestic. The prosperity of the great city of Aurum far surpassed the small town he had been in before. Turan followed the massive crowd, slowly moving toward the packed city gates. He noticed the guards were conducting strict inspections, as if they were filtering out wanted criminals. Taking it one step at a time, Turan thought to himself that the system in this grand city was definitely well organized. Suddenly, a harsh voice barked at him to stop, making him turn his head. He asked what was wrong, only for the arrogant guard to sneer that he wasn't allowed inside. The guard mocked his dirty clothes, forcing him to dust himself off before he could pass. Inside the city stood a towering skyscraper, completely surrounded by lush greenery. Turan looked up, realizing this was the exact library Mei Min had told him about. He silently marveled at its grandeur, feeling as though it had been built by magic itself. Turan walked up to the entrance to ask for access, but the guard gave him a blunt reply. When he said he wanted to go in, he was told the library was strictly reserved for mages. Turan confidently stated that he was a mage, which immediately made the guard suspicious. The guard snapped at him, "You've got a death wish, impersonating a mage like that." Kenya waved his hand dismissively, scoffing, "Someone like you, a mage, don't make me laugh." But the moment the guard reached out, his hand turned bright red under immense pressure. Turan remembered Kion's words, that mages could naturally sense each other's magic power. His eyes suddenly turned razor-sharp. From just that brief contact with his hand, Kenya felt a terrifying, crushing pressure. He winced in pain, squeezing one eye shut as he was completely overpowered. Kenya stumbled backward in a panic, blurting out, "Are you all right, sir?" before quickly stammering, I'm fine." He was shocked, realizing that the man standing before him was at least of noble rank. Kenya scrambled to introduce himself as a knight of the Bantas family, nervously asking which noble house Turan belonged to. Turan calmly asked, "Am I required to tell you?" To which Kenya respectfully replied, "No, sir." But he explained that using the library required permission from the head of the Bantas family, prompting Turan to ask what he meant. Kenya said he would contact the family, and in the meantime, Turan was escorted away to get washed up. Turan cracked one eye open, thinking wearily, "I really thought this would be a lot simpler." A blonde maid suddenly appeared. His arm was carefully and thoroughly wiped clean. Sitting in the bathhouse being completely waited on, Turan wondered to himself, how in the world did things end up like this? He suddenly turned around and ordered them to stop everything, making the whole group of maids flinch in surprise as they squeaked, "Yes, sir." Wanting some privacy, Turan tried to send everyone out, asking, "Is it really an issue if I just bathe by myself?" The maids timidly replied, "If we don't serve a noble guest properly, we'll be severely punished, sir." Being in such a massive estate, he had no choice but to give in. "Fine, suit yourselves." Hearing that, they immediately got back to work, chiming, "Thank you, sir." A maid with cool-toned brown hair accidentally let a quiet murmur slip, "He's just too gorgeous." Suddenly, a voice rang out, making her jump out of her skin and quickly cover her mouth. "What's wrong?" Turan was adjusting his hair in the back, wearing a brand new suit. "Is there something on my face?" The brunette maid frantically explained, "I was just so overwhelmed by how handsome you are, sir." The others beside her also bowed their heads, begging, "Please forgive us, sir." He just gave a gentle smile. "It's no big deal, you don't need to apologize." But they frantically replied, "Please don't be so humble with us, sir." His eyes suddenly darted toward the direction of a strange noise. "What is that?" From the other side, a pink-haired girl was slowly stepping into the room. Aisler appeared with a gaze as sharp as a knife, and a knowing smile. Is this really the beggar from earlier? She smirked and teased him, saying that after a bath and a change of clothes, he looked just like a prince. This caught the main character's attention. Wait, did she just say beggar? When Aisla asked, he immediately introduced himself as Turan, and she replied by saying her name was Aisla. She continued to pry into his background, asking which noble family he belonged to, but the main character tactfully declined, saying, I have my reasons, so I can't tell you. Aisla gently rubbed her chin. Is that so? What a shame. A mysterious smile suddenly appeared on her face. So this guy wants to hide his identity, huh? Then let's test the waters. No sooner said than done. She immediately released a powerful surge of mana that wrapped around her entire body. Her eyes were full of excitement as she stared right at him. Let me see what you have got. The main character was still lost in thought when he was startled by the sudden burst of mana. Just how strong are you? Come on, show it off.